All right. Is it recording, KB?
Yes.
All right. So thank you, everyone. So today I'm going to talk us through a little bit about health at every size. So I like this little caption here. Every time I go on a diet, I lose my mind. Unfortunately, it doesn't weigh very much. All right. So a bit of a plan. So we'll go through what is health at every size and some of the benefits of HAES, the risks of weight-focused interventions, and we'll have a look at some studies. So some studies that show the research in support of HAES, and they compare diet approaches and non-diet approaches, which is quite interesting. It's doing that quick click thing on its own. How do I stop that? Oh my Lord.
I think in PowerPoint there's a section at the top that has timings.
Next previous title screen presenter view.
And you click don't use timings. So on
a slideshow, you might need to end the show.
Because I'm on full screen.
Yeah, if you click on the slideshow tab, that one, and then there should be a little box there that you can untick.
Which tab, sorry?
Your mouse is on top of the
You're on
slideshow
it now.
Oh, yeah.
So click on the tab. Oh.
No, not what you meant.
You've got to exit the slideshow. There should be, if you click the tab. Oh, I'm sorry, it's up the top, the slideshow tab. Sorry, the tab.
Slideshow, yeah.
That one. Yeah, and then untick use timings.
Okay, great. I'm so sorry. This is
That's
all.
right. I think our template just has that always ticked for some reason.
Yeah.
So that's for everyone. That's how you
well.
turn it.
Thank you, Audrey. All right, here we go again. And we're going to talk about some of the common HAES myths, and also then just have a conversation about our experience as clinicians. So a little bit of a chat about it, but feel free to just jump in anytime if you want to have a question or chat about something. Now, I was being very tricky and put a video in here. I really hope this works. Most of you have probably seen this video, but I think it's fantastic. So we'll have a go.
Jess wanted to start a business when something surprising happened.
Today, I'm going to...
There's a big problem at the center of our research on weight and health. What's the problem? Well, picture a society made up of dogs. Let's say poodles are the bossiest group. They're the ones you see down at the doggy park barking at all the other dogs about how to live their lives in order to be healthy. But the problem is, poodles think that every other kind of dog is just a really big, a really small, or a really fat poodle, when actually the other dogs aren't even poodles at all. They're terriers, or mastiffs, or greyhounds, or labs. And all of the thousands of different dog breeds have different lifespans and different health risks. Each one has evolved to use food differently for different specialties at surviving. Some for staying warm, some for running fast, and some for being strong. They're meant to be different sizes and weights. So the poodles think the mastiff should lose weight, but a starving mastiff never becomes a poodle. The poodles don't understand that dogs come in many more sizes than they can imagine in their poodle-centric ways. So this becomes a problem when it comes to poodle science. When the poodles did their weight and health research and made their claim that lighter dogs are healthier and live longer, they weren't comparing thinner poodles and fatter poodles. They were comparing poodles and mastiffs. So the recommendation for mastiffs to lose weight is based on the false assumption that if all dogs reach poodle weight, then all dogs will have poodle health. But once again, a starved mastiff just isn't a poodle. This poodle science doesn't even test whether a starved mastiff lives longer than a mastiff who has enough to eat, because one would have to compare mastiffs who maintain poodle weight to mastiffs that maintain mastiff weight. And it turns out that starving mastiffs regain weight, which after all is a much better thing than starving. But the poodles can only see that regain as a failure of mastiff self-discipline. Look, poodles are great, but poodle-centric health policy is a nightmare. Good science tells us that it's better to recognize and respect the ways we're different, because how we're treated, Having good friends, having access to decent food, a place to play, restful sleep, and medical care make a huge difference in our health and longevity for all of us, whatever our size.
Alrighty. Has anyone seen that before? I can't see any of you. I can see Audrey only, but she's nodding. Yeah. All right.
Nodded.
Yeah, cool. So, what is HAZE? So, the Association for Size, Diversity and Health has put together those 5 points that outline what health at every size kind of includes. So, weight inclusivity, so accepting and respecting the inherent diversity of body shapes and sizes and rejecting the idealising or pathologizing of specific weights. Health enhancement, so support health policies that actually improve and equalise access to information and services, and personal practices that improve human well-being, including attention to individual physical, economic, social, spiritual and emotional and other needs. Respectful care, acknowledge our biases and work to end weight discrimination, weight stigma and weight bias. And we talk about that a fair bit as a team as well, acknowledging our own biases. Eating for well-being, so flexible, individualised eating based on hunger, satiety, nutritional needs, pleasure, rather than externally regulated eating patterns focusing on weight control. And life-enhancing movement, so doing something that you really enjoy as opposed to things like you need to do it for compulsive weight loss or any other control. So HAZE supports people in adopting health habits for the sake of health and well-being rather than weight control. So I like that idea of parking weight in the corner, and that's often what I kind of say to clients as well. And HAZE encourages eating flexibly in a manner that values pleasure, honours internal cues of hunger, satiety and appetite, and finding the joy in moving one's body to become physically vital, and accepting and respecting the natural diversity of body shapes. Does anyone have any thoughts about that as we kind of read through it? Is that kind of what you thought HAZE was, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say it's synonymous with a weight neutral approach? Do you kind of think of them as the same thing, or are there differences?
Yeah, no, I think of them as the same things. There's so many overlaps. Yeah, definitely. Oh, I've got my bar up there. There you go. Okay, so what are some of the benefits? So the benefits of HAZE are weight stability when at set point, improved biochem, sustained health behaviour, improvement in dietary variety, and obviously improvements in mental health. And some of the approaches of HAZE versus a dieting approach. So we allow the body to seek its natural weight by eating in response to cues versus trying to aim for a certain weight. And all food is acceptable, and quantity is determined by responding to our natural cues for hunger and fullness and taste, as opposed to the good food, bad food, and that external messaging. And the aim of exercise is to be more active and enjoyable and fun, as opposed to for weight loss. So these are some of the points, and I think I spoke with Na briefly about this, or someone recently, about how when we're trying to present the concept of HAZE to somebody, it can be tricky to actually work out where to start and what to do. But I think things like this actually frame it really well and provide them with an opportunity to think about how they see their eating and their exercise behaviours. And I also use this with clients too, because often with eating disorders, the clients are focusing on the nutrients in the food and trying to obviously either minimise that, or they're very specific or particular about only eating certain things for health. But food and health is so much more than that. So this is another good way to kind of just identify that it has so many different aspects to it. So weight-focused interventions can contribute to, and there's some studies there on the side, there's probably more recent ones than that too that I could find. Weight cycling contributes to that, so an increased risk of osteoporosis, increased chronic psychological stress and cortisol production, increased anxiety about weight, eating disorder behaviours, weight gain, and of course stigmatisation and discrimination against fat individuals. So there's lots of research to say that that's what happens when we have weight-focused interventions. And so that gets us to think, so if dieting actually doesn't work, which we know it doesn't, and there's long-term weight regain, and yo-yo dieting is associated with negative health outcomes, then is it actually ethical that we should be encouraging people to lose weight? I think we know the answer to that. And this little one on the side here, this cartoon, I can't change my height, I can't change my eye colour, I can't change the size of my feet. What makes you think I can change my weight?
Oh.
Yeah, if only we could be brave enough to say that, but it's true. So the non-diet approach. So health at every size is like a framework, and the non-diet approach is actually the way we then deliver this message. So, for example, so the dieting paradigm is aiming for a certain weight. Non-diet, as we said before, is kind of seeking natural weight when we just respond to our natural cues. Dieting will have us have rules about food, good food, bad foods, certain quantities or calories or serve sizes will be used, whereas we all understand that non-diet approach says all foods are acceptable and that quantity and quality are determined by responding to our internal hunger and fullness cues. And that can be a bit, I think, where people feel it's tricky, because I know that people have often asked me, like, are you just saying we just eat whatever we want? Like, has anyone had that experience of people asking, like, well, do you just, it's like a free ticket, you just do what you want, then that means you're going to be unhealthy? Like, does anyone have experience with that?
Yeah, definitely.
I think, I think that there is maybe more nuance in the all food is acceptable and there are no good foods or bad foods. In that I think traditionally all the weight-focused intervention have either been caloric restriction or low fat predominantly. I know there's a million other diets out there, but they kind of, they follow some of these. Those have been the predominant ones, and I think things have changed. And yes, it's couched as health, keto. There are multiple other diets.
Yeah.
But I think this idea that all food is acceptable, yes, but all foods are equally nutritious for all people at all amounts is a little bit, I think it can be taken to mean that, and that your cues then alone is completely sufficient for someone to know. Like, we wouldn't need dietitians otherwise. You'd know if you were iron deficient because you'd start craving more meat. You'd know that you need fiber because you start craving celery. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So therefore knowledge and rules guidelines are knowledge is still very useful. So I think that there's just maybe a little bit nuance, and even things like carbohydrates. There's actually a lot of research, for example, of a massive difference between glucose and fructose.
Mm-hmm.
So there is things we can learn, and then there are things we can know by responding to our cues. So and all foods being completely equal is probably not not true as such, but I
totally agree with you.
Yeah,
I totally agree with you, Nya, and I think this puts it in a good way, that line there, all food is acceptable. And when I'm having this conversation with clients as well, I refer to that real food pyramid, that one on the CCI, and I really focus on saying the base of, for those of you not familiar with it, it's a triangle. The base of it has all of the 5 food groups and, protein, carbohydrates, and then the next little level is fats. It's got veggies, it's got fruits, it's got everything in there at that base. And I say what we want to have is a really great foundation of solid nutrition, because the body does need that. But also the next level of that triangle is actually, let's include fun foods as well. So that says on that real food pyramid, it includes fun foods every day. And you know, that some people might think that that's not appropriate, but I actually think that that's quite appropriate to include fun foods each day if we've got a really good foundation of solid nutrition. So that's what I kind of frame it as. All food's acceptable. It doesn't all, like you said, now have absolute equal quality and nutrition. No, but it has its place, and it forms good relationships with food by having that flexibility. But yes, we do want to have that really solid foundation.
Can I also add, sorry, that if like I was having a conversation with a father about his daughter and supporting her through binge eating disorder, and she woke up in the morning and said, "Oh my God, those nachos for dinner last night were amazing. Can I have nachos for dinner?" And he said to her, "You can have nachos for dinner if you want to have, you can have nachos for breakfast if you want to have nachos." And she's like, "Oh, kind of sounds gross, actually." And I said to him, "And what would you do if she did have nachos?" And he's like, "Well, nothing. If she kept wanting to have nachos for breakfast, I would suspect that by day 3 or day 4, she'd start to feel a bit crappy having nachos for breakfast every morning. And she might then start to say, actually, I don't want to have nachos for breakfast every morning." And for me, that concept is one around, like, if we gave ourselves permission without judgment and rules and all of the emotional responses that then gets caught up in food and eating, and it was like if every food choice was neutral and unemotional, that we wouldn't naturally want to eat chocolate cake every day. We wouldn't want to naturally do these things. Like we would actually, like, our body would get sick of eating that way, and our body wouldn't feel good if we ate that way all the time.
And I think, KB, because we are so far from that in our society, because we are all so influenced by those external messages, that we've really lost that intrinsic ability to be able to actually, like Na said, like, I need celery or I need meat, or because we're all influenced by external messages. And I think all of us can relate to that. And we work in this space, but it's even worse for other people who abide by those rules so strongly and don't have that trust in themselves.
The other thing I was just going to quickly add is, I think where I've just noticed with my clients anyway, where they sort of trip up at this point is because the early focus in treatment is on what you've just described, Kira, is on this idea of like, be flexible and test it out and you know, move away from the rules. It's like, because we've focused so much on that, it's like as if they just interpret it as all food is equal and I should just only ever listen to my body. And then I find I'm really consciously later in treatment checking in with, like, you know, okay, how did you make this food choice? Because, yeah, so many clients interpret that as I should only eat, like, they'll take their lunch to work and then go, but I didn't feel like it. You had it there, like, you could have just eaten that, like, you didn't have to go to the shop.
Yeah. And
So
then celery is a diet food. That means it's not, you know, I think it can go the other way.
I had clients say that they interpret it as I should always eat exactly what I feel like
what I want.
this moment.
Yeah.
But I'm like, well, sometimes that's just like what you've brought to work, and like that's okay as well. You don't have to always enjoy the meal. That's okay.
I think I'll use the pyramid a bit more too, though. It's like you've got to have the basic shape. You know, you want to aim for the basic shape. And then anything in those, like, you've got heaps of room to play around, and from one day to the next, you know, from 1 week to the next, you can have a bit more of this shape, you know, some of the days, but overall you want the basic shape. And I think that could be a useful concept.
And I also think HAES, like, a non-diet approach comes after recovery from an eating disorder. Like, you're not introducing a non-diet approach to someone who has a restrictive low weight eating disorder, because their brain and the way they see food and their physiology is not responding in ways that give normal bodily cues. So they're not well placed to use a non-diet approach. They need to recover from anorexia first.
That's true. I would never say that early in treatment to someone that, like, you know, like that conversation I described would be like we're wrapping up and we're saying, like, it's okay if sometimes you're just eating because that's what's, you know, yeah.
Absolutely. And just to make the distinction, the non-diet approach and intuitive eating are also different. And so there are some, that's another conversation, but there's the intuitive eating principles. There are many of them there's 8 in total, but only about 2 or 3 apply an eating disorder treatment, and the rest of them certainly do not. And I don't even talk about intuitive eating because, as you said, I don't see clients at the end of their treatment, and always when we're seeing them at that first part, that intuitive aspect doesn't really apply, because we are actually telling them, don't listen to your hunger and fullness cues, because they're actually unreliable at this point in time. We want to regulate and normalize your system, and then you can start to trust it further. So what was that?
Thanks for clarifying that, Renee. I think that's really important.
Yeah, cool. And then physical activity, we've talked about that being joyful movement as part of that non-diet approach as well. So here's some of the evidence. So there were 6 randomised control trials done in support of HAES. So there was HAES and non-diet groups that experienced these benefits. So physiological improvements, so blood pressure, blood lipids, health behaviours were improved, physical activity, eating disorder pathology, and psychosocial outcomes like mood, self-esteem. So no study found adverse findings in the health at every size or non-diet group. Oh, I've lost my thingy, there it is. And then, so this is one specifically that I just wanted to talk about. So there was a 6-month RCT. It was a HAES group and a dieting group with a 2-year follow-up. The participants were white, obese, female dieters aged between 30 and 45, and there were 39 people to start in the group. So the diet group had calorie restriction, reading food labels, doing exchanges, benefits of exercise were introduced, and they were encouraged to walk at a certain intensity, whereas the non-diet group were educated on body acceptance and self-worth, techniques to focus on internal cues versus external cues. Nutrition was focused on the effect of food choices on well-being, and the activity that they chose allowed them to just enjoy their bodies, so they could choose what they wanted there. So with the diet group, so with regards to depression, body image and self-esteem, there was no significant improvement at the 2-year follow-up, whereas the non-diet group had a significant improvement at 2-year follow-up. Lab studies, similarly, diet group, no change, and then for the non-diet, there were significant changes in total cholesterol, LDL, systolic blood pressure at the 2-year follow-up. It's crazy. Like, we know this, but like, it's so interesting to see it there. Dropout rate, that was really interesting as well, because they're not sustainable. Diets and that kind of approach is really not sustainable long term. And weight, so weight lost and then regained as we would expect with the diet group at a 2-year follow-up, and then for the non-diet group it was just stable.
Do you know, Renee, whether the people that in the non-diet group, the LDL and the cholesterol and the systolic blood pressure changes were correlated with any weight changes at all, or completely independent of weight?
I don't know, Nya. That's a really good question.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah. So some common myths, and we can chat about more stuff that we've come across as well, but this was just some. So the health at every size message is that everyone is healthy regardless of weight. I think people get it confused with healthy at every size. So the facts, not everyone may be at the right weight, a weight that's right for them. However, efforts to lose weight are often futile and even harmful. So as we discussed at the beginning, and the HAES paradigm supports people in making health promoting choices regardless of size. Does anyone want to talk about that or have a comment to add?
I just think that's a really important point with our clients when we're trying to help them gain weight whilst maintaining like a weight neutral approach. Like, sometimes people think those two things are incompatible.
Yeah.
And it's like helping the family to understand why they're not incompatible, that this is not the right weight for your child. But once she's not controlled by the eating disorder, then you can maintain this attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've had clients who have lost weight and their physical parameters have improved, but then their psychological, social and work parts of their life has significantly decreased. Like even though that some of their pathology was within better ranges, then they weren't able to socialize. They were constantly depressed and anxious. They were tired at work and not performing as well at work. So I think it's also like, yeah, again, broadening out health and how do we help someone achieve if their health is important to them. So the next thing being like, health isn't an obligation and it might also not be a priority for people, but if they want to improve their health, that we broaden out what health looks like as well.
Yeah. So the second one I've got here is that health at every size message is that people shouldn't be concerned about nutrition and activity. You talked about that a little bit earlier about the nutrition part of it. So the facts are that eating and exercise habits are important components of health, but weight is not. Nara's probably got something to say about that. When eating based on internal cues, certain foods make you feel good and others don't. And KB was touching on that as well. And dietary variety is encouraged. And that goes back to that pyramid as well. Has anyone got any thoughts on that?
I think that second one, based on internal cues, certain foods make you feel good and others don't. I think that it is quite hard for people to tap into the more subtle aspects of what makes you feel good. For example, feeling perked up by coffee instantly kind of feels good, but then you might notice that crash later on. It takes a lot to notice that, and so it isn't and for people who then may have had trauma or various things, they're not very in touch with their cues. And so, and I do think we do have a food industry that adds lots and lots of things to food to give you that very immediate feel good component. So I do think it is really, really hard, and I think that this is where the nuance comes in working with people. It can be, while you're helping them like be, free up from these rigid food rules, it's also really kind of that subtle terrain of like, yes, you feel great immediately, but then what happens? Or, that subtle, and then not putting any kind of preconceived judgments or ideas onto that but yeah, I think it's a really hard one for people, because I think, as Audrey said, it can mean whatever makes me feel like it at that moment in time and I think that the other thing about the poodle thing is quite interesting to me, like that analogy, because I think some of our clients, I don't know if you have clients who say, even like who are kind of get a really high reward from eating. So I think more the binge eating disorder clients, maybe they're different from the other people who eat freely, as there are maybe within that subgroup, there are different people with different physiology where eating, just like some people, I hear people who apparently exercise is very, very, very fun and something they just want to do more of. I don't get that. I can't imagine that. So I think there are also different subgroups of people who it can be discrediting to people when they're trying to tell you, actually, I have tried to relax on food rules all my life, and please help me reduce, eating this type of food. And it can be very invalidating to say, actually, all you need to do is let go of all the rules and this will stop. I don't know if people have had that situation.
I guess there's like an intervention around that, in terms of like, we don't just say to someone, you're allowed to eat what you want to eat, and they come back day after day after day saying, I've eaten a bowl of a whole bucket of ice cream. It's, let's actually make ice cream okay. And the way that we're going to do that is, let's put in every day that you're going to have 2 or 3, or like whatever they say is normal for them, 2 or 3 scoops of ice cream, but you're going to have it every day. So you start to see that it's still always there. And some days you might have a little bit too much, and that's okay. The next day you're still going to give yourself 3 scoops of ice cream until you start to like reduce your emotion and anxiety around food. And that will be what reduces the food rules, when you start to see that you actually can eat them in a measured, moderated way. But you're not going to go from completely restricting them to a measured, moderate way. Like, you're going to, we'll give you practice, but you're going to like slip up along the way and eat more than what you wanted to. And that's okay. Try again tomorrow with your 3 scoops of ice cream, and you'll get to a point of ice cream not having as much control over you anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes that's what people interpret haze to mean, like go and eat. Yeah. But then we've had people who, I think I've seen binge eating, like people presenting with binge eating disorder who've never deprived themselves of a food that they eat a large amount of, and they really, really want help to reduce that. Yeah, it's a tricky one.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So this was another one, we kind of touched on this as well. People who eat based on cravings will eat junk food all the time. So one of the facts here is it's the anticipation of dieting and guilt around eating that leads to feeling out of control around food. And there is a study that's looked into that, and then that humans crave variety. So yeah, I've got a couple. That's basically all I had there. There's a few resources for people as well if you wanted to have a look on the slides there. But does anyone have anything they want to add that hasn't spoken yet? Or
True, some people haven't spoken, but I have a question for you, Renee.
You always would, Audrey.
I was thinking about your Poodle Science video and this idea that you can't change your height. But I guess what a lot of clients struggle with in that aspect is that technically speaking, they can change their weight. It just costs them a lot. And I often give them the example of like trying to change your weight is like trying to change your heart rate. Like I can control my heart rate. Yeah. And that's a little bit different to trying to change your weight or your eye color. Yeah, I'm curious to hear kind of your thoughts about how you explain that to clients.
Yeah, well, it is possible to control or to change your weight, but ultimately there's going to be so many forces trying to bring it back to where it needs to be, which is a natural weight for you, and hence why you've ended up in treatment, because it's not just the weight that's been affected, it is every aspect of your life that's being taken away. So that's the kind of conversation I have. So, but you're right, you can control your weight, but it's not going to be able to stay at a certain point and for you to live a full and happy life without,
It's because I love that you said that, like, there's all these forces working against you when you're doing that, not just like physiologically, but socially as well. Like it's sacrificing so much.
Yeah.
It's fair to say though that, because my understanding was like the body also fights you a little bit, like people who try to control their weight, their body's going to like want to regain that. Like, isn't that kind of part of what the weight science says? Like as they go down, their body is trying to get it back up, and that's why it goes down for 6 months and then typically back up. Or
are you talking about with when we're refeeding, or talking about
just weight loss? Like how like I think from what I understand, like most of the research shows that pretty much all diets will lead to some version of weight loss.
Yes.
But pretty much all diets will also eventually lead back to weight regain, except for like I think maybe a couple of medications. I can't remember exactly, but the consistent pattern is like doesn't matter what you do to get it down.
Yeah.
The body, even if you keep doing that same diet behavior, the body regains the weight. And there's a biological mechanism there, is my understanding.
Sorry, was someone else speaking?
No, you go, Renee.
Yeah, I was just thinking that we see that with our clients who have lost a certain amount of weight and they're very underweight, and then they're eating very, very little or even less than they were, say, 2 weeks ago, but they're still not losing any more weight. And like if we just thought like that was calories in, calories out, like what would be going on there? And like what you just said, Audrey, the body is then shutting down metabolic processes to be able to conserve the energy that is provided there to help the person survive. And Na's probably better at explaining all the medical side of it. But and I liken it to people, so I explain it like a power plant. It has like a core, and then there's all of these other aspects that are powered up on the outside. So when we have an eating disorder and we're underweight, all of the stuff that's powered up, and I liken this to hair, skin, nails, your period, being able to keep yourself warm, all of that becomes something that is far less important than the core. And the core is then obviously functioning your brain, and I use this kind of picture to say this is the part that it's focusing on, and even that is compromised because your heart, your brain, your digestive system, everything is influenced. So then that metabolic rate just shuts down. But when we start to eat again, and we see this with clients too, they're eating so much more than they had been, and we would expect to see the weight restoration starting. and it's not happening. And the clients are surprised themselves, just thinking, I'm eating like way more than I ever have, and I'm not going anywhere. That's because in my understanding is that metabolic rate is kicking up. All of those external parts in the power plant are being powered back up again. Hair's getting better, skin, nails, there's been tissues being repleted, muscle mass, and yeah. And so, yeah, the body is trying to help that individual survive. Did you want to add?
Weight is it's an endocrine system control. So there's like, I've been trying to read up on this and I can't get the pictures in my head, but there's like 20 different sort of hormones that promote weight gain and then weight loss. And then they're complex sort of feedback loops that try to maintain homeostasis. And, you know, we have feedback loops with everything else in our body. So when something kind of changes, your body is always compensating. So it's, you know, liver function, metabolism, fat absorption, how much of what you absorb goes into storage versus gets used up as fuel. You know, even just the basal metabolic rate changes. There's just so many pieces of the puzzle. So your body's constantly trying to keep things the same and prevent any sort of drastic changes. So yeah, sort of, I think, Kira, you use that beach ball kind of, you know, pushing it, or, you know, it's possible to push a ball underwater and you can do it. It just takes a lot of work and you can't keep it up. And then when you let go about, you know, people quite like.
Yeah, I just really love understanding that it's like a biological concept. You know,
it's yeah, and I talk about
the body.
Sort of, yeah, like, and it's not.
Like
we over focus on like what we're doing, like the voluntary part of it, but all of like so much of it is happening without us doing anything about it. So it's all very automatic.
I think I was going to share that same like analogy, Nyak. I think like the clients do always seem to connect to that really well when I'm talking about if you had an inflatable ball in a pool, if you leave it alone, it's going to like hover up and down according to like what's going on around it. And if you want to push the ball below where it sits naturally, you can do it, but you're going to have to block out other parts of your life to focus on it. And your arm's going to get tired. And as soon as you get a bit tired or distracted and you let off just a little bit, the ball's going to come back to the surface, but it doesn't slowly come up. Normally it pops out above the surface, and we might kind of catastrophize and think that it's just going to keep going up and up and up and up and up and up through the stratosphere. But actually, if we leave it alone, it'll just come back down to the surface. But most people are so distressed about how quickly it came up that they push it back down under the surface again. And then they just get into this pattern of like pushing it under it, popping back up, pushing it under it, popping it back up, and misattributing what they have control over and what they don't have control over, and ruling out some of the environmental factors that are also going on and influencing that.
Can I elaborate on that analogy and say, is it also that like the body is now trying to push the ball back up as well? Like it's not just you trying to hold it down. Your body's reaction to that is to try to get it to come back up. Is that what this science is kind of telling us?
Yeah, like all the like leptin, ghrelin, all the orexigenic and I can't learn it enough to teach it to you yet, but
okay, I was just like, if
one day
that's what the science says, like your body is tripping into a system that's kind of like, hang on, let's try to restore this, and that system is now making it increasingly harder to
yeah. And I also talk about like in a time where you can't open your fridge and go to a supermarket, a body that has learnt so well to store food, right, is a winner, right? It's doing really well. That's what's going to survive. So your body has adapted to this. Your body's not going to suddenly want to go, oh, well, I'll open the pantry and, you know, go kind of use it all up and let it all out. It's great at storing. It's great. This is what it does best. And talking about it as like things that they're not actually conscious of. It's not about their behavior. It's a body that's well adapted to survival. I'm reading a book called, you know, I think it's something like, you know, Why Nature Wants Us to Be Fat. This is design, a survival design. It's just we also just happen to live in a time of abundance. We don't go through droughts. We don't go through long periods of no food supply. So this is, yeah.
There's also another cool study that they found that when they allocated people to like dieting or non-dieting groups, that the people of the dieting group produced significantly more saliva than what they did before dieting and compared to the non-dieters in response to the thought of food, the word food, exposure to food and eating. So the body was like working really hard to cue them to food and the environment and to make the food so enticing so that they would eat it. And there was another really cool study of people who had a pattern of chronic dieting, that the body became so protective of not going into weight loss mode again that even thinking about going on a diet prompted binge eating disorder. Before the person prompted binge eating, before they'd even restricted their food, just thinking about restricting prompted binging.
Wow.
So yeah, there's like lots and lots of cool studies like that. Yeah, like it's a really complex system.
On the other hand, there's also lots of studies that show that for consumption of certain sugars cues you into all foods as well, and that also produces like the thinking about certain sugars will give you a kind of a dopamine dip that creates the craving. So there's lots of, I'm just saying our bodies are such sort of complex system, and there's stuff that we are conscious in terms of what we're doing, and then there's all this stuff that's going on kind of very automatically with what our liver and our gut and our microbiome and our appetite and sleep, weight, heart rate, all of those things going on. So I think helping clients sort of, as you say, Kira, drawing away from just that narrow, what am I doing, sort of gives them a little bit of a sense of like, a bit of room to breathe. They're not so desperate and they're not so stuck.
I think, Renee, if you haven't noticed, I think you've got us like excitable people all excited and riled up. So I hope that you're taking like all of the talking as indication that your presentation is really stimulating.
Oh, it's great.
I'm also mindful like that Kate and Chelsea haven't had much of a chance to speak, and whether they had something that they wanted to add.
It's been really like interesting listening. I think everyone has really good points, and it's good to get that insight of what it looks like with clients. But yeah, I think I was just thinking like taking it back to basics. It's just people knowing that, we're just ingrained in our mind that, you have to be thin to be healthy. And even just that idea that you don't have to be thin to be healthy. You can just do what makes you feel good, like do exercise that feels good for you and eat, with some guidance from us, but also listening to your body is just the main, thing that might help people a lot, just even changing their mindset about that. I don't know.
No, I think it's a really great summary.
I think you're right, Chelsea. Sometimes it is like there are clients that I want to go into the science a bit more with, but there are clients who like just keep it super simple. And, yes, there are some guidelines, and yes, you can listen to your body, and no, there's nothing wrong with your body, like just super, super simple. No, I didn't mean to say that, but what I mean is like us sitting here talking about all the science is just not therapeutic sometimes. Like that's just not.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like, don't tell me about all that stuff.
Yeah, I remember assessment I had with a client who kept talking about how she wasn't healthy and that how the way she was eating wasn't healthy and that her weight wasn't healthy, and like objectively she was probably like right. And it was like, and also in my assessment, you have told me that this horrific trauma happened that you have then managed to bring up children in the midst of and keep a job and keep yourself fairly emotionally stable to a point that now you're about to access treatment to resolve your trauma. Could we give you a fucking break? Like doesn't matter if your body is unhealthy and that you're eating in a way that's unhealthy. Like you have done a phenomenal job to survive, and now it sounds like your priority is your mental health. Who gives a shit if your physical health isn't healthy? Like you can only tackle so much at a time. And for her, she ended up like deciding that that's all she needed from treatment was like permission. And then she had one and did like trauma therapy instead. It was like, yeah, actually, fuck it, you're right. Gonna go and do trauma therapy instead.
It reminds me when you're using that, changing your weights, like changing your height. I actually use something about, because I can use my grey hair. I say I can change my hair colour. It just takes me about an hour every 6 weeks, and I can just totally forget about it in between. It doesn't impact on my life. It's it's pretty easy. But if it got harder, I don't think I'll walk around feeling very bad about myself if my hair isn't the right colour, and there might be other important things I might actually want to work on. So it's just that kind of I think everyone can use another. People just laugh a little bit and kind of look, have a second look at my hair colour, but yeah, so I think maybe in some ways it's nicer than the height one, because it's like, yeah, you can change it. It's just like, well, what does it cost? How much do you walk around defining your success or failure by this one criterion? Yeah.
I'm curious as well about Kate, because I feel like when I first met you, Kate, it was like I don't think it was something that you had worked in, but you were interested, kind of solely in, but you seem to understand the concept so easily and quickly. Just curious as to what thoughts and input you have around HAES as well.
A lot. I think, and I for me, I just kind of want to reflect. I'm finding it really stimulating, and for me that really translates as I'm reflecting and kind of considering different opinions and putting that together, and I'm just really loving hearing how people phrase it and word it and their analogies and ways to really engage clients in this in a way that's really accessible for everybody. So yeah, so I'm getting a lot from it. Please don't think just because I'm quiet I'm not. This is just me doing the reflection bit.
You're a reflective person, Kate. We just have to draw bits out of you every time. Akira does that.
I feel like we need a little
whiteboard. Sort of talking and wanting to make sure the less talkative people.
I'm bad at that. I feel like in our tutors in school we used to have a little whiteboard and you could run up and write Audrey. So you'd force a little cue. So that us talkative people didn't just dominate the conversation.
Oh.
But I do have another question for you, Renee, when I'm allowed one.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I was thinking about this idea that, because now I asked as well about how many of those people did actually lose weight, and I think what I'm trying to wrap my head around all the time is the idea that some people do on an individual level get healthier when they lose weight. And I think about what that sort of, in that little cartoon, we think about, say, the GP and the client that says, why are you telling me to lose weight? A lot of GPs are telling people to lose weight because on an individual level, they see an impact on their client. And we can zoom out and say, well, that probably wasn't necessary. But I think that I wonder if that's where people get quite stuck, in that when they change their behaviors, they lose weight and they get healthier. And that can sometimes come from a diet. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I think I kind of know what you're saying. And a lot of those studies and lots of it does talk about when you lose weight, and yes, like what you've said, you go on a diet, that's not just the one thing that changes. Other things change as well. So that's that causation and correlation, isn't it? So there's definitely the weight loss is part of it, but is it completely attributable to the benefits in the health that we're seeing, or is it because of that and other things, or is it because of other things? And so you can't just pluck out, okay, dieting and weight loss, and that's the weight loss is equaling to better health, because lots of other things have happened as well. Is that what you kind of...
Yeah, I think it's a really nice way to summarize it in that, because sometimes I think that's where clients can be applying it to themselves and thinking, but I was healthier, but I did feel better. But as you're saying, they happen to go on a diet and they happen to get healthier. But we can also say, well, it's not, we're pinning it on the diet. Whereas we could also be saying, it was you feeling like structure in your life, or it was you feeling more motivated, or it was you changing your eating behaviors because previously you were binge eating and now you were not, or
engaging in social situations, decreasing stress, getting more physical activity, like so many things. And that's that picture at the beginning I showed with the little circle with the health in between it and all these other things that impact it. Diet and exercise is just one little part. And it's not taking up more of the pie than anything else. There's all these other bits that we need to consider as well that influence health.
And I think we've just got to also be kind and compassionate to the GPs, because they're also seeing lots of people who do lose weight and their health improves, but maybe and all the other domains improve. But we're seeing the ones who run into trouble, right? So we're seeing also a poodle, different kettle of fish, a different population who run into problems. So just like we don't sort of go and tell all teenagers they can't drink alcohol, but if you work in Clarence Street, the alcohol addiction service for young adults, you have a very different approach to how you advise, or so if someone's gotten psychotic from using marijuana, you're having a very different population who have a very different risk profile. So your general advice is different to the advice you're giving to this population of people who have gotten stuck with this type of problem. So I think the problem with HAES sometimes is like all advice about changing your diet, it's evil. I think it can be a little bit like that, whereas there are people who do make changes to their diet and eating, and along the way some of them lose weight and some of them don't, whose lives and health do improve. They're just not the ones ending up in our clinic. So we're dealing with a different group of people.
I think that's like you're talking about weight loss being a side effect of changing into behaviours. And it's accidentally frame it as the weight loss was the cause of the improvement. People are going to fixate on the wrong cause and then stop doing the actual cause.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, with GPs, I think it's just messaging it in that way to say like weight loss was the side effect of a more helpful behaviour.
Yeah.
Can I say there's a study that was able to like add validity to that, in that like they used just liposuction with no change in health behaviors, and like liposuction is a way that we can reduce someone's weight without making any other changes, and what they found was there was no improvements in health. So we are able to say that weight loss in of itself actually doesn't improve health, at least based off that study.
That's so interesting. Kate, what were you going to add?
I was going to add the exact same thing, and that's something that I'll have that conversation with clients when we're kind of talking about that correlation, causation, behaviour. We're not saying that it's related to weight itself. You can go, I get liposuction, that's not going to increase your health, but let's look at the behaviours, the choices, the blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So I'll often use that analogy and they'll be like, oh.
Yeah, I really like that. I'm going to use that one too. And I was just going to add as well, like we talk about the doctors or the GPs seeing improvements when there is weight loss. However, it's just one snapshot in time. We know that weight loss is possible, but it's not sustainable for the most part. So we're seeing that there are improvements in potentially because of weight loss. But is it sustainable? Are these clients then turning up back in the office 2 years later, 1 year later, with weight gain and more with the issues, so we're that's the ethical part of it. That's us saying, okay, yeah, you can say this, and we can say weight loss does influence some outcomes, but is it ethical because it doesn't actually work long term?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I sincerely hope the GPs move away from weight loss, but making dietary changes. I'm worried about this idea of making any dietary changes is a no-no. I think there's definitely a place for that. And I think my worry is sometimes with the HAES messaging, it's like, oh, how terrible, they advise them to change something they're eating, or to change the proportions of something, or to have more of something, or to have less of something. I think the important thing is, as you're saying, it's about improving health and how do you check that's actually happening.
Yeah.
So, I hope the GPs definitely move. There's still way too many doctors completely stuck in that weight paradigm. Yeah.
Thanks.
Would everyone mind if I get a photo of Renee with her slides back up and everyone on the presentation? And is everyone okay with me taking a photo of that and sharing it to celebrate Renee's very thought-provoking, stimulating presentation?
Now I have to work out how to do it again. So screen.
This makes perfect.
And
yeah.
Open my slides. And then do you want me to go to presenter view? Can you see yourselves as well, KB?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Let me just, I might need 2 goes. Let me just do a test one.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, now I know the test. Let me just get rid of that. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Awesome.
Didn't know where to look.
Thanks so much, Renee.
Oh, thank
Really
you.
got me really stimulated for the day. So thank you for facilitating that and giving us some didactic information, but also an opportunity to get passionate and energized about it.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for your engagement, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
See ya.
Bye.